Hello, this is Professor James Strickler. This is a course in American government. This lesson is from Unit 11 about public policy. It's Lesson 7 about fiscal policy. In this lesson, you'll learn about fiscal policy, about Keynesian economics, and about supply-side economics. In a previous lesson, we learned about the business cycle, about how the economy goes up and down. And during the downtimes, what we call recessions, people suffer through such things as unemployment. We learned that voters demand that the government do something about this. When times are tough, they want the government to step in and make things better. But we also learned that in America, we have a free market, where the ups and downs are really governed by the individual choices of the people involved in the economy, rather than the government's hand directing it. As a consequence, the government can only have a marginal impact on the economy. We've talked in the previous lesson about how all the government really does is try to take away some of the extreme highs and extreme lows, sort of even out the ups and downs of the economy. They can't stop recessions from coming, but maybe they can make them a little less severe and not last so long, for example. In the previous lesson, we began to talk about how the government tries to manage the economy. And we looked at one of two possible ways. Those two ways are monetary policy and fiscal policy. In the previous lesson, we dealt with monetary policy. In this lesson, we'll address fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is about the government using its powers of taxing and spending to try to help the economy. There are two basic approaches to fiscal policy. One is called Keynesian economics, and the other is called supply-side economics. Let's look at Keynesian economics first. Keynesian economics is named after an English economist from the early 20th century, a man named John Maynard Keynes. He developed a particular way of looking at the economy that changed how economists would view it. And it's his new view that then informs this particular approach to helping the economy. Keynesian economics theorizes that if during a recession, the government goes out and borrows a whole bunch of money, and then spends that money, they will stimulate the economy. Now think about why this might work. If the government is spending money, what that means is that they are actually hiring people to do things for them, such as build roads. Well, when they hire those people, then they have to give them a paycheck. And then they take that paycheck and they go buy things with it. They rent a house, they go shopping at the grocery store, they buy a new car, whatever it may be. And then those things that they do put other people to work. And then they pick up a paycheck, and then they go do stuff. And so the idea is that by the government spending all this money, they get the economy going for everybody else. But notice, according to Keynes, they have to do something kind of negative to bring this about. They have to borrow a bunch of money first so that they have it to spend. So Keynes went on further and said that during the time of recovery, when the economy starts improving and starts expanding, that the government should then raise taxes to pay off the debt that they accumulated during the recession. Unfortunately, that never seems to happen. Critics of Keynesian economics say, yeah, we run up a big debt by borrowing a bunch of money and spending it, but we never pay that debt off. The chart here shown on this slide, which it's kind of shrunk down small so you can't see the exact numbers and dates, represents the way the debt has grown during our country's recent history. And you can see that we've accumulated a lot of debt. We'll be talking about that in the next lesson. But for right now, just recognize that critics of Keynesian economics say it doesn't do any good to stimulate the economy if it just puts us way in debt to do it. But they also doubt that Keynesian economics actually works to stimulate the economy. And the evidence on whether it does or not is disputable. The Keynesian approach to economics is generally favored by Democrats. This is because it involves the government spending a bunch of money on government programs. Democrats tend to favor big government with lots of programs designed to try to help people in various ways. So this approach to stimulating the economy fits right in with their views. And so they tend to be the biggest supporters of Keynesian economics as a solution during a time of recession. The other approach to fiscal policy is called supply-side economics. In supply-side economics during a recession, what the government does is it cuts taxes and eliminates various regulations. They try to stimulate the economy by essentially making it easier to do business. They want to make sure that the companies that are trying to produce products are hindered as least as possible in doing that. That they don't have to pay a bunch of taxes to the government, they don't have to comply with a bunch of regulations, and in that way they can then produce their products cheaper. If they produce their products cheaper, then the consumers will be more likely to buy them, then they'll need to manufacture more of them, they'll need to hire more people to do so, those more people will get paychecks, with those paychecks then they'll go buy things, and in that way supply-side economics tries to stimulate the economy and help it during the time of recession also. Critics of supply-side economics love to call it trickle-down economics. The idea is that the benefits go to the people at the top of the economic ladder, the ones who own the big businesses that are getting the tax breaks and getting the easier regulations. And then the critics say those benefits never make their way down to the rest of the population. Instead, the people at the top just keep all the benefits and make their houses bigger, make their bank accounts bigger, etc. Now, part of this criticism may be correct, but it also doesn't recognize something. And that is, even if the rich guy owning the corporation keeps that money to make his mansion nicer, putting in gold-plated bathtubs and things like that, he's got to be paying somebody to put those bathtubs in. So it actually still is even then contributing to jobs somewhere. Supply-side economics is generally favored by Republicans because it assists businesses. Republicans tend to be thought of as more pro-business than Democrats. They see the solution not in government, but outside of government. And this solution to getting out of recession is essentially the government getting out of the way of private business, allowing them to cure the recession themselves. But in practice, both Keynesian economics and supply-side economics have resulted in big debts. It's kind of obvious why they do with Keynesian economics, because they're very intentionally borrowing money. But then, unfortunately, they don't pay it off later. But with supply-side economics, the reason the debt might be run up is that they're cutting taxes to begin with, and they're very intentionally bringing less money into the government. The hope is that this will then stimulate the businesses. They'll go out and make more money and end up paying more taxes in the long run, and the government will be able to pay off its debts that way. But in practice, that has not worked either. Whether you've had Keynesians in charge or supply-siders in charge, in recent American history, we've continued to have the debts run up. And that'll be the big subject of our next lesson. So now let's review what we learned in this lesson. What does fiscal policy concern? Not physical, fiscal. Does it concern building infrastructure? Does it concern taxing and spending? Or is it about terrorism? Or does it concern the money supply? Fiscal policy is about taxing and spending. Remember, it was monetary policy that's about the money supply. What is Keynesian economics? Is it about us cutting spending to balance the budget? Or do we cut taxes to stimulate the economy? Or do we grow to pay off the debt? Or do we spend to stimulate the economy? In Keynesian economics, the government spends extra money to try to stimulate the economy. What is supply-side economics? In that, do we cut spending to balance the budget? Or do we cut taxes to stimulate the economy? Or do we grow to pay off the debt? Or do we spend to stimulate the economy? In supply-side economics, we cut taxes to stimulate the economy. That completes this lesson. The next lesson will also be from Unit 11. It'll be Lesson 8 about the government debt.